Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali, and having learnt quite a few things from, through, and from within human interactions, and having pursued and completed my master's in business administration and in clinical psychology, I today wish to talk about nature and nurture. Not necessarily nature versus nurture, which in my understanding had been the topic of research and topic of discussion for a very long period, though that aspect might also be included here. And yet, understanding how nurturing or how supportive nurturing can support nature and natural development. Now, in order to understand these aspects, nature versus nurture, or how nurturing, supportive nurturing, can support natural development, I'd like to consider two stories. I'd like to share two stories as an analogy, as a metaphor to help us understand both of those aspects. Now, these are the stories that, in my understanding, most of us have heard at some point in time or the other, either during our earliest formative years, earliest developmental years, or at least some point in time or the other with regards to our own development through the course of our lifetime up until now. Now, it's the story of the baby elephant who, when it was an infant, a month old or 2 months old, able to stand on its own feet, able to walk here and there, at least for some distance, but was still dependent on its caretakers, is tied to a heavy metallic chain. Now, for the sake of narration, let's just assume that this is the length of the entire chain. This is that heavy metallic chain that the baby elephant is tied to. So, of course, quite naturally, given the length of this metallic chain, it can only move around to a certain distance. It cannot go beyond that because it is tied to this chain. It is chained to this chain. And if it tries to pull itself to break free from the bounds of the chain, quite naturally it gets hurt. Quite naturally it feels the pain. And thereby, on that particular day, it stops trying. Because after a while, the pain becomes unbearable to bear, at least on that day. Now it wakes up again the next morning and it tries to move around a little and it tries to break free once again from the chains of this chain, to once again realize that it's getting hurt all over again. It's feeling the pain all over again, and it stops trying to wake up again and do the same thing all over again. The third day converts into the third month, into the sixth month, into the 12th month, into the 365 days cycle. Now, we all know, or at least most of us know, that it takes a certain number of days to start building into a habit, to start building into a muscle memory. We all know that in order to build a muscle memory, it has to be practiced consistently. And so, of course, even this elephant, this baby elephant, was trying to break free from the bondage of the chains for 365 days. But gradually, the memory of the pain had left its impact on its muscle memory, on its nervous system memory, which is why it had also gradually started to accept the bondage of the chains, till it became so comfortable with it, till that adaptability became so maladaptive that even when it grew up into an adult, wherein it was bound, wherein it was tied down by a rope which it could easily break, it still refused to break the ropes. They were no more those heavy metal chains which would dig into its flesh and cause that pain with so much of intensity, but it was the muscle memory, it was the nervous system memory which had gotten formed when it was an infant, when it was a little baby, that when something gets tied down around its ankles, around its feet, it gets stuck at that place and cannot move beyond the length of this chain. Now let's consider another story wherein an eagle happens to lay its egg on a farmer's land somewhere. At least that's how I remember the story to be told. So this big bird lays its egg on the farmer's land. Now on this land, the farmer is also raising chickens. Now of course both are bird species, but one is a predator and the other is very likely a prey to this predator at some point in time or the other. One is a huge bird while the other can only grow into the size of a hen or a rooster. One cannot fly very high, while as the other one soars high into the sky all alone. And so as this egg hatches and the baby eagle comes out, it sees itself surrounded by hens, and the hens live together. They operate as a social species. So this particular eagle, this baby eagle, given the environment that it was growing in, begins to think of himself as the chicken, starts to walk and starts to sound like a chicken. Or maybe even if it doesn't sound like a chicken, it would do everything possible to try and sound like one or not to voice its sound at all, because then it would be considered very abnormal. Then it would not be considered as a chicken. Then it would be ridiculed. Then it would feel embarrassed and thereby feel ashamed. So it will try and do everything to fit itself into the mold of the chicken. And let's again remember that it's a baby eagle as of now. And let's remember that it's the baby eagle that is developing, that we are talking about, who's getting the message from its environment that it's a chicken, and thereby should act, should walk, should talk, should behave, and should fly like a chicken, which is what it exactly does. And so it even does not try to fly high, because chickens don't fly high, and thereby it spends its entire life believing that it's a chicken and living the life of a chicken, which nature had not intended it to do. Now, if we take these two stories as the metaphor to understand ourselves, as an analogy to compare our own lives, the elephant, which even as an infant is able to stand on its feet, is a pretty large creature, is a pretty tough creature, is a pretty physically strong creature. When it gets hurt repeatedly, it stops trying. Not that it did not try earlier, but eventually gave up trying. So in a way, when we were representing this code as a chain, to understand this example, this is an external factor given by external sources, which then gradually gets internalized, which then gradually becomes an internal belief, which starts to run the course of our life. Now, these external factors that acts as the chain, which come from the outside, are with regards to our families, are with regards to our communities and their belief system, are with regards to our own educational systems, are with our regards to our own religious systems, are with regards to our own social systems, are with regards to our own entertainment systems, movie systems, or any other kind of entertainment systems, are with regards to our own organizational systems. All of these are external forces, external chains that right from the time we are little infants are giving us certain information with regards to where we are tied down, where we feel stuck, where we feel held back, and where we feel that this is the only distance that I can travel. And over a period of time, if that gets repeated constantly and consistently, it starts to form our belief system, wherein either we begin to hear, you are a little too much, a little too difficult to handle, or you're not enough, not smart enough, not good looking enough, not capable enough, not intelligent enough, not beautiful enough. And we do everything possible. which then becomes our subconscious and our unconscious beliefs, which get piled up one on top of the other repeatedly, constantly, which becomes a part of our muscle memory and thereby a habit which we repeat automatically, which we repeat mindlessly, which we repeat unthoughtfully, which then becomes a pattern of our life, dictating the course of our lifetime and our decisions. Now, there's another thing to reflect about with regards to this particular story, that there was trauma, the acknowledgement of that there was trauma that this baby elephant had to face. Now, the trauma was not just the fact that it was tied to a heavy metal chain, and when it tried to free itself, it kept getting hurt. That is one aspect, the very obvious aspect of the trauma. The other, not so obvious aspect of the trauma was that there was not a caretaker around. Its community of caretakers around, a grown-up elephant around, or at least a few grown-up elephants around, to be able to wisely tell him how to get out of the chains, how to free itself from the chains without getting majorly hurt. Of course, there would be a little discomfort, but the intensity of the pain and the intensity of the helplessness would not be there because there were the right support system available for this baby elephant to realize that somebody is there to help me out when I'm in pain, that somebody else knows the way out and they are trying to help me without majorly damaging myself. So in this story, the other aspect is the lack of the social support, of having nobody around to share its pain with, to share its helplessness with, which is why it felt stuck and it gradually got stuck. To come to an understanding that not only is this incident traumatic, but the bigger trauma the elephant's life is through this story is that I can't expect anybody to help me. Because when I expected somebody to help me, there was actually nobody to help me. So in a way, it reinforces a subconscious belief. It frames a subconscious belief that nobody shows up, that I can't count on anybody, that I can't depend on anybody, that I can't trust anybody, and social support is a total bullshit. That I can't be open and be vulnerable, and that I should stay fixed in my place, that its fate was going to be chained, that it is destined to be chained, that it was fated to not be free, that its destiny was written in chains that somebody else had placed on it, and that I need to stay small in my life so that I don't get hurt again. Which reminds me of a beautiful quote by Carl Jung, that most of us, which I'm paraphrasing here, are living lives too small for our souls to grow. That most of us are trying to fit into the versions that others had given us. That most of us are wearing shoes that are too small for our feet, invariably causing a lot of discomfort internally and physically as well. Now, with regards to the second story, it again asks us, it begs us to reflect onto the story to understand that probably had this eagle been picked up by the owner of the land, by the farmer, and taken to another place wherein it was raised like an eagle, it would quite naturally behave and act like an eagle. It would walk like an eagle, it would talk like an eagle, it would pray like an eagle, it would fly like an eagle. It would not be afraid to spread its wings out. And yet, during the most initial phases of its development, wherein the development is happening at the fastest rate possible, when it was told from the external sources, when it observed from the external sources, when it heard from the external sources, when it interacted with the external sources to come to believing that it is a chicken, it quite automatically, through its interaction on a daily basis, would come to understand that it is a chicken and thereby has to live and die like a chicken. That it cannot be the predator that it is naturally designed to be. That it cannot fly solo because, like the chickens that live in a group, it is a chicken and thereby it has to live amongst the chicken. It has to fit in with the chickens in order to feel some kind of a safety. It has to earlier adapt itself to think, to sound, to act, to fly, to behave like a chicken. But over a period of time, the same adaptivity turns maladaptive, wherein the eagle abandons its own eaglesomeness to think, to sound, to act, to behave, and to live like a chicken. And not just live like a chicken, but even die like a chicken. And that's not to say that being a chicken is anything bad. That's not to say that being a chicken is demeaning. But being born as an eagle and then to fit into the world of a chicken is a different ballgame altogether. Being born with wings as huge as that of an eagle, being born with the size of an eagle, to then live one's life as a chicken is maladaptive, is not a wholesome existence, is not a mindful existence. And through these stories, it is telling us, it is reminding us that our earliest experiences in life through the external factors shape our belief system. It is these external chains and it is these external environments that nurture our understanding of how high we can fly. Or it in a way also reflects, it in a way probes us to reflect as to what all external messages over a period of time have we internalized that have become our subconscious or unconscious beliefs that are not enabling us to free ourselves from these external chains that have now become internalized. From these external beliefs given through the environment that we were raised in, the environment that we interacted with, that tells us that we should not spread our wings as big as we want to, that we need to fit ourselves into the molds given by the external sources so that we don't experience humiliation, so that we don't experience neglect, so that we don't experience rejection, and so that we don't experience abandonment. It begs us to reflect the places where we hesitate to take some decisions that will be in alignment with our body, mind, and our soul. It begs us to reflect on the belief systems that we have internalized, that at one point in time came from the external sources, the chain being the analogy of that external source, which unconsciously tells us that if you do not stay tied to these beliefs, you then become disloyal towards us. You then become disrespectful towards us, and maybe many more things as well. It begs us to reflect who or who all gave us those messages that we have internalized, that got internalized because it became a part of our personal subconscious and unconscious. And unless we begin to reflect on those aspects, the places where we are very hesitant to either ask for help or to take any decision because at one point in time there was no help available, because at one point in time there was no support available to help us understand that when you take this decision, I will be there to support you, I will be there to have your back. And we begin to understand that being open and being able to ask for help, or being vulnerable enough to be able to ask for help, having the courage to ask for help. And maybe if we are willing to do that for ourselves, to look at our triggers which chain and bound us, which have become our internal mechanisms, our subconscious and our unconscious, we then probably will be in a better position to make a decision whether do we want to unchain us or whether we still wish to be chained. And the choice is completely ours. Let's try and reflect on all of those aspects if we do choose to do that. And I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the contextual content of these videos, please do like, share, and subscribe.